don't spend all your money, kid, because it's really, really hard to make money and it's 10 times harder to keep it. I think that was one of them. And I think the other one was, it's all about the numbers. There's only two ways to do business: increase sales or decrease costs. That's it. And don't do anything because it's an ego play. Increase, sales or decrease costs. That's it. And those things probably have been the ones, and everybody else knows all the other ones. Of course, do what you love. Of course, do your research and everything else, but the room knows that already.
I got a question for you, though, that I think will help kickstart everything. So imagine that I own a business, doing well, but I know I don't have my marketing, especially my branding and positioning. Right? I see a lot of authors we work with who have good businesses, and their branding and positioning is bad. And through the book process, we have to actually unpack that a little bit, which is not what our process was designed to do. It just kind of happens. But if I'm in that position, successful business, my positioning, marketing is not what I want it to be, my brand and my message, where do I even start thinking about that? Because a lot of them I see, they're almost overwhelmed thinking about anything about messaging or branding. So what do I do? Walk me through the thought process.
Yeah, for sure. And Tucker's being modest because he's legit one of the best in the world I've ever seen at this. So love jamming with Tucker on this. He said three things: marketing, branding, and positioning, and actually another one, messaging. So start with positioning, and this is where Tucker starts with all of his authors. A lot of you have worked with Scribe, if any of you haven't. Before he starts with any author, he says, what's the positioning? And the simplest way to start positioning is opposite adjectives and an XY graph. So you all have paper in front of you, draw a vertical line and a horizontal line. Positioning is the beginning of all marketing. And for positioning, you want to own opposite adjectives. So I'll give you a simple example. If I say, what are the two competitors to, let's say, the post office, who would you say? FedEx and UPS. Exactly. FedEx and UPS. So draw a vertical line and then draw a horizontal line. You want to choose opposite adjectives for your business, and we're going to do it for FedEx, UPS, and the Postal Service. Opposite adjectives are adjectives like fast and slow, expensive and cheap, exclusive and open. TED, the TED conference, is very exclusive. Toastmasters or even TEDx is fairly open, right? These aren't right or wrong. The idea is not to choose the right one. The idea is to choose two opposite adjectives so that you're in a quadrant completely by yourself. So FedEx owns fast and expensive. There's an arrow in the FedEx logo to remind you that they're fast. And they're happy to own expensive. If I need to mail a Rolex to Tucker and it's got to be in Austin by tomorrow, I'm not using the Postal Service. They own fast and expensive, and they're happy to. Now, the Postal Service is happy to own slow and cheap, the exact opposite of fast and expensive. If I'm going to mail a birthday card to my grandma and I'm a week early, which I never am, I could just buy a stamp and take it to the Postal Service. So yes, they're competitors, but they're really not competitors at all because FedEx is over here and the Postal Service is down here. Now, when you do this, most entrepreneurs, they get all excited about doing this exercise and then they choose opposite adjectives. We're amazing and they suck. We're awesome and they're terrible. No, the positioning graph you basically should be able to hand it to your competitor and have them go, yeah, the Postal Service knows they're cheaper and slower than FedEx, and FedEx knows they're faster. So that's positioning. And there's a whole book, Jack Rees and Al Trout. It's kind of fascinating, the book. It's one of the best marketing books of all time if you want to go down the rabbit hole. But that's the summary of the book, is that XY axis and opposite adjectives. Plot yourself and all of your direct competitors on that. And then say, how are you different? And what two words do you want to own? And with a personal brand, and we can go into personal branding if you want, personal brand, you want to own one word, right? So like, if I say, who is the vulnerability woman? Who would that be? Brene Brown, exactly. If I was like, who's the hustle guy? Gary. And the 4-hour guy? Tim Ferriss, right? You all know their name with just their word. So with a personal brand, you want to own one word. With positioning your business, you want to own opposite adjectives, so 2 words. Does that make sense? Awesome. Positioning.
Positioning by
The Battle for Your Mind by Al Rees and Jack Trout.
Very good book.
Incredible book. Yeah. But the funny thing about that book is it's written in the early 80s, and he talks all about how many marketing messages we're being bombarded with and how busy the world is and how distracted we all are. And it came out in like 82, right? What else? Who's got another question on marketing? Oh, so that's positioning. Branding. I mean, we could spend a whole week here on branding, but branding, in a word, is the collective feeling of what people feel and know about your brand. So a brand is not a logo. It's not a color palette. It's everything all rolled into one. But this is, again, this is a room full of expert direct marketers. With branding, Tesla's revenue was over $21 billion last year, and they do not buy ads. Tesla has never bought an ad, and they did $21 billion. That's because they built a brand. Yeti Coolers built a $1 billion company selling a product that nobody needed. If you think about a cooler, everybody know Yeti Coolers, the white. 10 years ago, Yeti, yeah, they saw a problem, et cetera, but nobody had sandwiches that were spoiling. Nobody's beer was getting warm. Yeti came around, and they solved a problem that we didn't even know we had, which is we weren't proud to brag about our cooler. Nobody had a cooler problem. Everybody had a story about their cooler problem. Because if you're the toughest fishing and hunting guide in your group of 10 people, you're not going to brag about your $33 Coleman 5-day cooler that, guess what, works fine. We worry too much about the product and the features and the benefits and not enough about the story and what I call a portable story. So Yeti created a cooler. Sure, it's 3 times better, so it should cost $100 compared to the Coleman that works fine. But it costs $300. That additional $200 in the price is the story. It's because a Yeti cooler is worth bragging about, and then they have brand extensions and can sell $30 mugs for people who can't afford the $300 cooler, but they can get the mug that's worth bragging about. Does that make sense? So if you don't know if you don't know how your customers are talking about your product, if you don't know how your story about your business is spreading, it's not. So what I love to do is think about, and we can do a hot seat, we can pick out anyone and say, when people talk about your business, what are they saying? And you can't use our fancy copywriting marketing terms. You have to say like what they would say in human language at the bar, right? So take Tucker and Scribe, a business I know pretty well. They turn ideas into books. So the way people talk about them is, man, I've had this idea for a book for a long time. I just can't get it out of my head. And then I worked with Scribe, and it's cool. I didn't have to write. They just interviewed me and pulled it out of me. That kind of language, know your customer's words and how your customer talks about your business.
Yeah, I went and grabbed all these books because it's so funny.
Oh, yeah,
Here's the different versions of positioning.
Right.
This is the 20th anniversary edition, which was years ago still. And then, they've got the origin of brands, same authors, incredible. And then the 22 immutable laws of marketing.
These are all absolute gold.
Brands. These are, all out. What's funny about these guys, this is one of their books that it didn't do as well as the other one. It's called Horse Sense, How to Pull Ahead of the Business Track. And one of the premises behind this is, they say, in spite of what many people will say about success, a lot of success is just simply riding the right horse. Mm-hmm. Is latching on to someone who's like making shit happen. And it's, So.
Yeah, for sure. And those opposite adjectives, so we'll take Joe and Genius Network, we're all here. The opposite adjectives for that, we never talked about it, we don't know what they are, but one of them could be, because there's a lot of masterminds you can join, right? One of them could be, it's super fun and it's super generous. I've been parts of masterminds that are, there's the okay content, but everyone's kind of eyes on their own paper and they're trying to get the most value so they can take it away and they see it as competitors. This is super generous, super sharing. You guys are all helping each other, work with each other, and it's fun. Joe's a fun person. This entire everything around us is fun, right? So those may not be the exact ones, but if someone said to Kathy, hey, I'm thinking about joining, Genius Network versus a different mastermind, what makes Genius Network different? Fun, generous. There's 100 other, adjectives you could use. Yeah, fun, yeah.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video, and I want to let you know that I have a new book that's come out, and if you'd like to get it absolutely free, there's a link below in the description, or you can wait till the end of this video, or you can simply go to joesfreebook.com and you can get a copy there.
So you've helped a lot of people with their books. You know a tremendous amount about not just book marketing and words and titles and headlines and everything. But even the reasoning behind why you go beyond why are you writing a book, right? And a lot of people think if I write a book, that's going to answer my prayers, but that's just the start, right? And in many cases, people would be better served to figure out what the hell they want to do with the book before they even write the book.
100%.
What advice could you give of what you've learned with helping people maximize what the creation of writing a book, having a book written, what are the things that you have seen that and have done for clients that have helped the most?
Yeah, a book is, in 2020, other than a TED Talk that happens to go viral like Simon Sinek, a well-written book is one of the largest, strongest pillars in building your personal brand. And I know some of you don't want to build a personal brand because you think you don't like Instagram or you don't want to try TikTok. It's not about the platforms. It's about owning a word, and there's lots of ways to do that. We did the Gary Vee's Hustle, Simon Sinek's Why, Susan Cain is Introvert, Brene Brown is Vulnerability. What is the word that you want to own in your personal brand? Personal brand, and this is one of those things, like I said, this room is amazing direct marketers, but direct marketing is I put $1 in the top and $2 comes out the bottom, or even $1.10, that's fine. Brand, you don't know. Like, you don't get an immediate return, it's not measurable in a funnel. When it comes to books, a book is one of what I call the bricks in the wall of your personal brand. So once you know your word and what word or phrase or even opposite adjectives you want to own for your brand, and it's okay, like if you're building a business around coaching, it's okay if your word is vulnerability, and that Brene Brown already has that. Brene Brown doesn't have time to coach everyone in America. She doesn't even really do coaching. So it's okay if your word is taken, but from a positioning perspective, it's obviously better if it's unique and you sort of own it. A book, I love, so what Tucker's built with Scribe, there used to be gatekeepers in our world, and the gatekeepers have all left. In the last 10 years, the gatekeepers are gone. Gatekeepers are huge traditional publishers, music agents, comedy agents, everything else. Look at the brands. Justin Bieber was discovered on YouTube. The gatekeepers have left the building, and nowadays the gatekeepers, there's some that are still left. Publishers have consolidated, right? Some of the big fancy buildings still exist in New York City. But the thing about gatekeepers is they don't want you until you don't need them. And that's why Scribe is an amazing company, because the gatekeepers of traditional publishing, they're only interested in you. It's funny because Tucker and I have seen this 1,000 times. An author writes a proposal, goes to traditional publisher. The author's wondering how the big publisher, Portfolio or Penguin or whoever, Simon & Schuster, is going to market and sell the books. Guess what the publisher's wondering? How the author is going to market and sell the books, because they don't know how. So building your personal brand, and don't get hung up on Instagram or email lists or tactics or, oh my God, Gary Vee's using community.com now, I got to use community, right? That's the hot new thing. It's not about a platform, it's about owning the words. And a book is the strongest, biggest pillar in your personal brand. 20 years ago, Tom Peters talked about personal branding. He said, our most important job is to be the CEO of Me Inc. and the importance of building your personal brand. He said this 20 years ago when Google was called Backrub. Literally, look it up. I have a slide of it. It's a black and white picture of a hand on somebody's back because Google tracked backlinks, and before they came up with the name Google, it was called Backrub in 1997. Tom Peters, as usual, way ahead of his time, saying the importance of personal branding before Twitter or Instagram even existed. So I would challenge you guys, don't get hung up on, I don't need to build a personal brand because I'm not good at the platforms or the tools. Think about owning a word and then building your bricks in the wall. That can be social proof, testimonials, media, articles, etc. And then another little rant on this. People get really excited nowadays if they get the chance to write for Inc. or Fast Company or whatever. Do it once. If you want to, do it once so that when you put as seen in Inc. on your website, it's legitimate and true, and then never do it again. And then also repurpose that on your own site, on Medium, on blog. You are working for free for them. And positioning wise, you know what they're going to say? Oh, it's great to have a column in such a prestigious magazine as Inc. magazine. No, it was prestigious when they made it with paper and ink because it was scarce. Now they will take anybody, and anyone can write for Inc. online, right? Not in the print one. If you can get a cover magazine, a cover of Fast Company on the...
Ink actually turns me.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
You're right, otherwise.
Yeah.
What? Talking to this, say it again.
This ink turns me down.
Or Colin.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah. I mean, that's how ridiculous.
But I'm the only one. I'm the only person I know who's tried to get one that got turned down.
Yeah, because
only me.
Yeah, 100%. Like you are creating electricity for their engine to work. When you're in a clicks and page views business, they need content to run ads against and content against. There's no scarcity. It's the same as Amazon selling books. Like, you can sell as many as you want. So any of you can publish a book on how to stand on your head and drink water at the same time. And there's no gatekeeper at Amazon. You can publish it. So that it's good and bad.
Okay, so the reality of actually either hiring marketers or people to help you or becoming good at this. If someone wanted to become more skilled at this and you had to, off the top of your head, recommend a plan and a path to do that on things that everyone here could do that would be incredibly helpful, things to read, things to watch, what would you recommend?
100%. So I was super fortunate in 2009 to leave a big, boring corporate job and spend 6 months in a room like this with Seth Godin, who's one of the greatest marketers of all time. And I just absorbed everything he said. But nothing he told me was anything he hasn't said 1,000 times in his books, in his blogs. If you want one book, I would start with Seth's most recent book called This Is Marketing. It's an orange book, and it's a greatest hits of Seth Godin, one of the greatest marketers of the last 30 years. And he tried to compile it all into one thing. If you want to go deeper, he's got an online course called the Marketing Seminar. If you want to learn it, I highly suggest that book. And then that marketing seminar, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $500. But this, like the XY adjectives, like, the thing I'll say is forget the fancy cutting edge tactics. Most people aren't doing the fundamentals. Most people don't know their positioning. And this book came out in the 80s. Most people don't know verb your noun. So, and I would say get good at this. I mean, only get good at this if you want to grow your business. Marketing is about understanding humans, not the product you sell and how many think about Apple, the Apple holiday ad. A kid goes home and he's like a floppy-haired kid and he's home and it looks like he's ignoring his family and he's on his phone the whole time. And at the end of the commercial, after it looks like he's ignoring his family for a whole minute, it turns out he was using his phone to create a mini documentary of his family Christmas. He hooks up his phone to the TV on Christmas morning, plays the whole thing, stitches it together with music, and of course the parents and grandparents are crying. That compared to Verizon, who's selling gigabytes and coverage maps. That's your opportunity, is to figure out the story that your business is telling, because we all have roofs over our head in this room. We all have food on our table. We're not buying, we're not buying what I think of Super Mario, the little guy, and then the flower, and then Big Mario, who's invincible and throws fireballs. Stop selling the flower, start selling Super Mario. Lululemon sold the first 1 million pairs of yoga pants to women who do yoga. And then they sold the next 10 million pairs of yoga pants to women who do brunch, who think they are a kind of women who maybe does yoga, but they don't know where the nearest yoga studio is. That's fine. It's not unethical, but it's the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves.
Since me and you are good friends with the brilliant marketer Jay Abraham, he's and I want to do a shout out to Jay.
Absolutely.
And of course that goofball Kevin Harrington, who you actually are on Shark Tank with. And this video is going to go on ilovemarketing.com. What are your thoughts on marketing? You obviously love marketing. You're a good marketer. You've built not only companies, but a brand, and marketing is essential. So what are your thoughts on marketing?
It's constantly changing in one way. It's constantly saying the same in the others. Mm-hmm. Today it's about transparency, and today it's about over-delivering and giving people as much as you can, because that's the only thing that's going to separate you necessarily. It's always about positioning. And it's always about what are you selling them, what's the movement you're selling them. And I always feel like people do say that I may be brilliant or I may be smart. I feel like I know nothing when it comes to it, because I'm constantly learning from guys like you and Jay Abrahams of the world, and I always look at something like I'm an idiot. Mm-hmm. Because I'm ready to learn more and more and more, and I'm not too comfortable with myself and thinking I know what's going on. And that's just the way I look at marketing and branding, and I believe that that's the only thing that is going to position you to be successful, is how you market and brand it.
Yeah, every time we've gone to dinner. I've seen you speak a couple times. We've not hung out a ton, but we've spent some time talking, and I always hear you say things that I think are incredibly smart pieces of wisdom that I'd like to highlight. I think going into anything with, even if you're amazing and you've had great success, with a beginner's mind, is just the smartest position to be in. Checking your ego, knowing you're never as good as your own PR. I mean, you know and understand those things, and you've seen many people that have literally gone to the top and tanked because they never built that level of confidence. So let's talk about how people can gain capabilities, and for whatever you're able, whatever access they could have to you. You're available to speak. I think you're a great speaker. So if anyone out there wants an amazing speaker, how does someone get a hold of you? Go to the Damon John Academy, your books.
Yeah, there's very many touch points. Obviously, you can go to daveandjohn.com where you can work with me or either to consult or to speak. You can go to the academy if you're somebody looking for knowledge and understanding, how to become a better entrepreneur and or meet other like-minded people such as yourself. You can see me up on Shark Tank fighting with those other 4 sharks every Friday night, 9 p.m. I have 2 books out, Display of Power and The Brand Within, where, maybe you don't necessarily understand my, my way of thinking. And, before you listen to my thesis to understand where I come from, because you can either say, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or you resonate with where I've been. So there's many ways to, and of course, Twitter. The Shark Damon, I'm on Twitter. The Shark Damon.
What is the mission and purpose behind O2E Brands, and how do you grow these companies?
Yeah, so O2E Brands stands for ordinary to exceptional. So we started by taking the ordinary business of junk removal and making it exceptional through customer experience. And then we realized, wow, I mean, what we'd learned over 22 years with 1-800-GOT-JUNK, imagine if we took that process and said, how do we do that to any home service brand? And so our real vision is to be the most trusted brands in home services, one exceptional experience at a time. And it's creating a recipe that we learned from 1-800-GOT-JUNK and its journey into Shack Shine and Wow One Day Painting and so on. So it's trying to pick industries. When you say, how do we grow them? Picking something like Wow One Day Painting, we are not looking for people that like painting, that want to paint, that want to build a painting business. We want people that see an opportunity to build an empire in a fragmented space. And so Wow One Day Painting is one where we go in. A typical painting company would take 2 weeks to paint the whole interior of your house. We do it in a day.
Yeah.
Wow One Day Painting. It's just a numbers game. You put 2 people in this room, 1 person in that room, and you just get it done in a day with the same quality, but less disruption. And so we're trying to take spaces that are ordinary and saying, how do we make them exceptional?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So obviously you need to do all this through people and teams. And,
right.
And it was interesting, you talk about your first 8 years with till you hit $1 million. So what are the most important lessons that you've learned about finding, hiring, and nurturing the right people?
So 1994, 5 years into the business, I fired 11 people, which was my entire company. 1 bad apple spoils the whole bunch. I had 9 bad apples, and I just said, you know what, guys, this isn't working, and it's not working because of me making the wrong choices. And I started by saying, I'm sorry. As your leader, I've let you down. I didn't give you the love and support you needed. I might not have found the right people, and I started again. And so the most valuable people lesson I learned was it's all about people, finding the right people, and then keeping them by treating them right. And so the way we look for people is the same way I think people look for friends. Is there a connection? We didn't sit down and become friends by going, so Joe, what do you like to do for fun? And tell me about the last time you blah, 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 whatever. It's like you just hit it off. You trust someone, you build a relationship, and you become friends.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing should happen with employees. Don't rush through an hour and interview someone and expect that you've made the right decision. You just can't. So finding the right people, part of it is taking the time. I mean, you'll get people here. I interviewed someone last week, 2 weeks ago, and I said, how many interviews are you on? And she said 12. This is my 12th. And I'm like, wow, okay, you're halfway. And I was kidding because this was the last interview. But like 12 interviews is a long time.
Yeah.
But we're pretty darn sure after 12. And we'd rather do the work up front.
Is that normal?
It was a very senior position. And so maybe a little less normal. But for senior positions, yeah, maybe 10 to 13 interviews. And for someone working in the sales center, it might be 2 or 3.
How many people directly report to you, or I mean that's always a tough question because you interact with so many, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And what is do you look at it as a hierarchy? How do you look at your structure here?
Yes.
From you, starting with you as the leader.
Yeah. So as the leader, I have 2 direct reports, I guess it is. So Eric, who's our president and COO, while it's a direct report, it's also us really what we call 2 in the box. I'm the visionary, he's the implementer, and together 2 heads are better than 1. And then my assistant, Jen, who you've met, right? So, I mean, those are my reports. So anytime, and I interface with everybody. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff going on. I'm open door. There's no door on my office because I don't have an office, but it's really connecting with people, but the flow, the hierarchy, if you will, of decision making seems to have a flow. So Eric makes decisions, and if he's got concerns or needs some feedback, he'll come to me and we'll talk about it. But if I start interfacing and making decisions as the CEO with everyone in the business, all hell breaks loose.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Before you schedule a meeting or a meeting is scheduled as you, what are the standards, the criteria? Are you a guy that does a lot of meetings, or are you sort of meeting avoidant? There's, and I've heard everything under the sun. You know, our friend Cameron Harold wrote "Meetings Suck," but the purpose of that is most meetings suck because people do meetings in a crappy way. So I wanted to, and then there's Peter Drucker who would say you're either working or you're in meetings. And so there's different ways to think about it. So I wanted to get your perspective on
I do think, you know, I believe in what Cameron says, that meetings suck, but they don't have to.
Right.
If you have the right meeting setup and structure and really ensure, do we need a meeting? So my criteria for meetings, and it's an O2E Brands thing, but purpose, outcome, agenda. Doesn't matter if it's a 10-minute meeting, a 3-hour meeting. Why are we meeting? What's the purpose? What do we want to get out of this? And then what's the agenda? How are we going to talk about things? And so if somebody sets up a meeting with me and doesn't have purpose, outcome, agenda, Jen says, what is it? Otherwise, we're not meeting.
Right.
And she'll push back and say, do we really need this meeting? Does it really need to be half an hour? Could it be 10 minutes? Could it be combined with another meeting? So I try to be very back-to-back and efficient. And then I practice Dan Sullivan's stuff, even though I haven't sat through Dan Sullivan's work, even though I know him. Where Monday is my day out of the office, my buffer day, to really kind of go through and catch up on things and focus on things outside of the office. Then I've got 3 focus days at work where I'm back-to-back in meetings, and then Friday's my free day where I try not to think business on most Fridays and try and focus on family or fitness or friends. And
well, let me ask you about that. So how long have you been doing that with Fridays, and how consistent are you with it?
I've been doing it for probably 15 plus years. I'm consistent maybe 80% of the time. So I'd say I go through periods where it just gets really busy, or something's kind of hit the fan and it's like, I feel like I'm needed, and it's more out of guilt than being really needed. And so I'll step in and I'll try and help, or I'll make myself available. But I really work hard to keep those Fridays free so that I can keep myself healthy and keep myself mentally clear, right? I think as entrepreneurs, we often go home and continue to think and work on things. And so to have some time to recharge the batteries, I think is incredibly important, at least for me.
Let me ask you something, and I think it is increasingly more difficult from all the people I've interviewed, all the entrepreneurs I'm constantly working with over the years, and especially we are more connected electronically than ever before in human history, and more disconnected in terms of relationships, and constant screen time, and so many ways that people can reach you now. So you say, I try to not think about work, and obviously, try is, because I can completely resonate with that. I'm a guy that meditates, I do yoga, I work out, do a lot of stuff, and the rumination about business and open loops for entrepreneurs is a very difficult, challenging thing. So what are some of the ways that you have learned to disconnect and rejuvenate that you could describe that would be helpful for people watching?
It's easy. Actually, when people hear this, they're like, wow, that is easy. When I go on vacation, and I probably take 8 weeks per year, sometimes in a month chunk. And what I do is I get my assistant, Jen, to change my passcode on my email and all my social media. So I can't access anything. So on my cell phone, I can't sit there and check email. I can't check Instagram. I can't do anything when what I call going dark. And so dark from technology, and it works for me. So I will literally go away to Italy, like I did this summer with the family, and I won't hear from anybody. And the only person that has sort of permission, if you will, to call me for an emergency would be Jen. And I don't get called. Like I remember when this first happened, it's like, well, what if the office burns down? Call the fire department. What am I going to do from wherever I am, right? And I get that people might not have been comfortable with it in the beginning. But what I love about it is it's a tool that we've spread into the organization. When people take vacation, we expect them to go dark. We expect them to get someone else to change their passcode so that they can't check in. Now, so let's say on weekends. So last Thursday, I sent an email to Jen and I said, I'm going dark.
Yeah.
See you next weekend. Next week, I mean. So I just shut off my own email and have the discipline to do it just for a weekend, but I didn't check in.
That's great.
And so I think that people have to give themselves permission to do that. And people might think, oh, it's nice to be king. You're the CEO. Great that you can do that. No, we want everyone in our company to do that. We give 5 weeks paid vacation to all our employees, and we have for years, decades. We want people to use that time and be free from work and not feel like they've got to check in.
Yeah. And they're more productive that way too.
100%.
See, people think if you keep them working, sleeping at the office, staying up late at night, all this sort of stuff, that you're going to squeeze more
does
work
not
out
work.
of them. Yeah.
Does not work.
Yeah. My friend Kathy Colby has this great language. She says that time to quit working is when working is no longer working.
Yeah.
And if you're working nonstop, you get to a point where you just can't. It's like reading a book, and you read a page, and you're at the end of the page, and you're like, I didn't comprehend any of it, so you start reading it again, as if that's gonna. It's like you just gotta, give your brain.
Well, and Cameron and I used to say years ago in the early days, like, work is our hobby. We love it so much, we don't have to stop. Well, you know what? I love skiing, but I can't ski all day, every day, or I'd blow my legs and knees out. I mean, you need to take a break, no matter what your hobby is.
Yeah.
And recharge, and your family needs you, and your friends need you, and it's important.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So speaking of Cameron, so Cameron is a good friend.
Yeah.
We're actually having dinner at his house tonight.
Yeah.
And he's been a Genius Network member for many years. I've seen him write a lot of books through the time I've had the relationship. So he did a lot of stuff in this company, and you also ended up, I believe, firing him, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So what? Let's talk about Cameron. I mean, what could you say about that dude?
Yeah, so love him. I was his best man in his wedding.
Yeah.
So hard to take someone when you were the best man in his wedding and then going, hey, buddy, this isn't working out so well, and having to fire one of your best buds.
Yeah.
So, and Cameron would tell you, I'm sure he has, and he would say it if he was here with us.
Oh, he publicly says that when he gives speeches, so yeah.
But I mean, he would even say this. He would say it was the right thing for both of us.
Yeah.
Tough decision, right call. And so what was happening is Cameron and I are both a little ADD, fire ready aim types. And as the company got beyond 75 million, close to 100 million, we started to make decisions just too quickly without thinking. And the company wasn't a little speedboat that could turn on a dime. It was becoming, a little ship.
Yeah.
And he helped us go from 2 million to 106 million. And we were making some decisions that needed more rigor.
Yeah.
And having two leaders who are too ADD, fire-ready aim types at the top isn't sustainable. And so had to make the change. It was super tough. Failed with the next COO. And then third time around, found Eric Church, who actually, ironically, was the three people on the planet that told me about Eric. One of them was Cameron.
Yeah, which is great.
It's great. And so, kudos to Cameron for having peace with it in the end. Like, it was hard at the time, and it was a strain on our friendship, but we're tight now. We do anything for each other. And it was one of those, we're so grateful to have had those 7 years together to get through the pain and then come back to, hanging out at the Genius Network. He was the one that said, you got to do this, you got to go.
Yeah. No,
So
he's great.
cool.
He's great. And and there's so much, one question, Cameron wrote a book on it called Free PR, and you guys did a lot to leverage PR in your growth. So how did you do that?
How did we get free press?
Yeah.
It was picking up the phone and telling stories. So earlier, you and I talked how I would call up the press and I'd say, I've got a great story idea for you, and sell on enthusiasm and try and give them a clear pitch, because they're busy. They didn't have time to listen to pitches, and you'd lose them in 20 seconds. If they didn't like the pitch, I'd say, what's missing? Why isn't it a great story? What would make it a great story? And I'd always get the answers that would help me on the second call, third call, fourth call, and it was amazing. Because journalists all seem to think the same. I mean, stories, you look at anything that's in the press right now, you can say it fits a formula of rags to riches, hero's journey, someone crashing and burning, whatever the story arc is. There's simple formulas there. And when you understand them and you realize you've got a compelling story and you frame it in the right way, bingo, free press.
Yeah.
And so too many companies, I think, get out there and put their stuff out to the world, but it's not a story or it's not framed in the right way.
Yeah. It's great advice. I mean, just asking those questions to find that out. I mean, that would work with almost anyone where you're not landing. You could even ask the client, why didn't you buy? What was missing? What would you need to have heard?
100%.
Yeah.
And people don't, I think people, I don't know why they do this, but maybe it's ego where you get caught up and you go, oh, the person said no, they didn't like my story. Well, it might not fit with them, but use it as an opportunity. Don't hang up.
Yeah.
Find out what's missing. They'll tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What are the struggles of starting 3 new brands?
Yeah, I think like kids, I've got 3 young kids and, they're always competing for time and everyone needs mom and dad and all that sort of stuff. And I think it's a similar thing with brands. People will say, what's your favorite brand? I can only tie to the analogy for those that have kids, that it's like kids, you don't have favorites. I mean, there's certain days, certain times where you're like, you are not my favorite. But, it's one of those things where trying to bob and weave between them can be a challenge. Because depending at the stage of growth they're at, they need different things. So I think that's the hardest part, is just figuring out how do you give enough time to the brands when they need you and so on.
Well, because there's different types of entrepreneurs that kind of have their way of doing things. Like, for instance, I've interviewed Richard Branson, God, probably more than anyone. I mean, I've spent 6 weeks of my life on Necker Island, and got hours and hours of video, and we've only put out a couple of produced things, and it's been a while. But I've got, he's a guy that's tried to start a bazillion things and license a Virgin brand, and a lot of them don't work,
Sure.
And he has his core ones that do. And then there's other people that'll say, stick to this thing and don't spread yourself too thin. And some people may look at what you're doing and argue and say, well, you can't ultimately decide, so you're trying to do, 4 different brands at the same time or whatever. So what is it inside you? What are you hoping to achieve and wanting to achieve? I mean, and not hoping, because you are doing it. I mean, it's not like something you're not doing. You're doing it. Why 3 different brands versus 5 versus 1?
I mean, it partially started by accident, where I was getting my house painted, and the first 2 or 3 people that come in, they reeked of cigarette smoke, they were late, they just, no level of professionalism, and they're coming in giving me a quote on my paint job, and it was sort of what I expected. But the 3rd guy came in, uniformed, shiny van, clean cut. He said, our prices are the same, the quality is the same, I've done this for 22 years, but what's different is I'll get your house done in a day. I didn't even think he could do that. I didn't think it was possible. And I come home at the end of the day, 6:30 p.m., floor, ceilings, molding, trim, everything was immaculate.
Wow.
I was like, wow, this is cool. Wow, wow one day painting, right? That's how I felt. Same comment you just made, and the company's wow one day painting. And so it was partially out of the right place at the right time. It was
being wowed.
Seeing another opportunity. But why I think it's progressed on to other brands is just, it fits for us because it's home services, and as long as it's a home service that we can make exceptional on a similar platform. I've gotten pitched on things like snow removal. Well, snow, you don't have snow in every single market we're in, and it's seasonal, and it, yes, it's a home service, but it doesn't really fit in the same way. So we're cautious on starting new brands. We're focused on the brands we've got, but really what motivates us to keep doing it is more franchise owners living the dream.
When you said wow, when I said wow, that totally, this got my brain thinking of going, so you're like a guy that's just looking for the wow, and if you can package your formula and your process around wow and scale that, then that's what lights you up.
That's it.
Yeah, which is pretty awesome. Why not sell equity or raise money? And because you talked about staying private versus going public, why?
I think it's a couple of reasons. It's forced me to slower and steady wins the race kind of deal. I mean, 0 to $1 million, 8 years, that's slow. If I gave away equity, I might have had others tell me where they thought the business should go and what the direction was. So I like owning the vision. I don't need to own anything else, but that vision, that North Star of where we're going has been important to me. And I've heard too many stories of people that have sold their business or pieces of, and they thought that taking chips off the table would bring some happiness. They thought that having some equity to help them grow to that next level, it often doesn't pan out. And I think, I like the fact that it forces us to grow at a steadier pace and to do things the way we want to do it.
I mean, I imagine you've had like people come here and dangle large sums of money in front of you to buy the company and stuff at times, or no?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about it one chapter in the book where I'm on Sonora Lodge, a big fishing resort up in British Columbia. And it's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. It feels like lifestyles of the rich and famous. And Waste Management, 2 of their execs got me out on a boat.
Oh, that's right.
Wined and dined me and brought me up there. And we had a great time. But then I'm out in the middle, away from shore, can't see shore, in a fishing boat catching salmon with 2 garbage execs, think maybe Sopranos, right? And they're like, we want to buy your company. And I'm like, do I have a choice in this? Is kind of what's going in my mind. And they said, we're talking 75 to 100 million bucks at a time when my company was so tiny. But I said to them, I go, honestly, guys, like, thank you, but I'm not done building this. I'm just getting started. And I don't know what I'd do with the money. And I said, if you guys gave me $1 billion, something just ridiculous, I still wouldn't sell, because I really love what I'm doing and the cause I'm after of growing entrepreneurs and building brands.
Wow.
And I don't want someone else to take my happiness away that I get from growing this. So never sold a chunk of it, and just believe that it's too much fun and too big of an opportunity to not see through.
So what's the best piece of business advice you've ever received, and how did it change your business path and your direction?
I think it was, well, I received a couple of them. First, the first one was somebody said, don't spend all your money, kid, because it's really, really hard to make money, and it's 10 times harder to keep it. I think that was one of them. And I think the other one was, it's all about the numbers. There's only 2 ways to do business: increase sales or decrease costs. That's it. And don't do anything because it's an ego play. Increase, sales or decrease costs. That's it. And those things probably have been the ones, and everybody else knows all the other ones. Of course, do what you love. Of course, do your research and everything else, but the room knows that already.
So Fubu it's had $6 billion in global sales. What are the key elements, secrets, and requirements of building like a $6 billion brand that people here can utilize?
Well, in the days that we built it, I think that there are a couple of things. First of all, in business, it's purely about distribution. I think that you can have the greatest idea in company or whatever the case is, but you don't have a way to distribute it. It's a pipeline. It's a challenge. I think that to understand, and don't fall in love with your product where you think that you're creating something new, because we will never create anything new. It will only be a new position or a new angle on it, a new price. I always say Twitter was as I shared with you before, it was a note on a pigeon's leg 1 million years ago. And I didn't put 3 sleeves on a T-shirt. I just created a movement around it. So it's always a different positioning. And I think those are the ways. And then after you get to a certain level where you have brand equity, I think it's creating a large amount of really amazing strategic partners. Licensing, whether it's a territory or licensing a different angle of your product, is important. I'm not going to understand what they necessarily want in Japan. Even though they want FUBU in Japan, it's a different culture. As well as I can do my men's business, but you and I were 2 guys. If you wear 32 and I wear 32, there's 2 sizes 32. There's 32 long, 32 short. If I sell a pair of 7 or a pair of 8 jeans to a female, there's 17 sizes, because the thighs are too big, the butt's too this, the gaps over here. So I would license that business to an expert in that area, because I don't have a lifetime to learn the ladies' business as well. So I think that strategic partners are very valuable.
All right, so my name is Nick Nanton. I'm originally from the island of Barbados. My family's been there for 300 years. They came as Welsh pirates in the 1600s. So as I was growing up, my dad kept asking me what I wanted to be. I kept telling him I wanted to be a pirate. So the older I got, the funnier I thought it was. You can imagine the older I got, the less funny he thought it was. Until one day he came up to me and said, "Hey, Nick, I figured out what you're going to be." I said, "What's that, Dad?" He said, "You're going to be a lawyer. That way you can still pillage." That's my only bad lawyer joke of the day. But I really am from Barbados. I started playing guitar at 6, started songwriting at 16 because I liked girls and they liked songs. And I put out my first record at 18, of which there's still 800 copies under my parents' bed. Why? Because all the things I'm going to teach you today I knew nothing about. Now that I know all these things, I want those records to stay there until that place burns to the ground someday. So I did all this stuff. I went up to the University of Florida at 18 years old, go Gators, and I figured out there's 50,000 students there, and they had a thing called a student activities fee. every student put a little bit of money in this fund, which was a big fund. They let a bunch of 20-year-old kids run it. So I figured I should get involved. So I got involved and I helped bring in lots of talent. I brought in Bill Cosby, President Bush, Don Shula, Bobby Knight, the cast of The Real World New Orleans. And I figured out that these people were really just like you or me. I'd been producing records. I still work with a drummer from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I was working with the band Sister Hazel. I was making music videos. And I realized that really all these people had certain things in common. So I did what any person would do. I went to law school. And so why did I go to law school? 2 reasons. My brother went to med school, so I had to do something. And secondarily, I wanted to be the president of a record label. I knew lots of presidents of major corporations were lawyers. So I went to law school, continued doing media creation and stuff. And then I got out of law school, and I got married after my first semester of law school, had my first son a week after I took the bar exam. So life and fast forward has always been kind of my forte. So I got out of law school, and this whole thing called Napster happened while I was there. I don't know if you caught on that. So that whole business kind of didn't exist when I got out. And so my business partner, Jack's like, well, hey, Nick, I know what you should do, but you're not going to like it. I said, what's that? He said, you should practice law. Because I went to law school. The first day in law school, they asked what kind of law you're going to practice. I said, I'm never going to practice a day of law in my life. And so they thought that was good because they do the look to your left, look to your right thing. They're not going to be there. They thought it was going to be me, but it wasn't. So I got the last laugh there. So out of law school, he says, hey, we can position you as one of the top experts in the entire world as an entertainment lawyer. Does that interest you? I'm like, yeah, it does. He goes, well, what you probably don't realize is you have 2 unique skill sets. Media creation. I'd made music videos. I'd made magazine ads. I'd just done a bunch of media creation. And you understand celebrity buzz building and PR because of the people you've worked with. So, okay, cool. He said, and what you may not realize about me, and this is him talking to me now, he said, Nick, what I have a specialty in is personal branding and direct marketing. He had marketed and sold over $1 billion worth of products and services with those 2 skill sets. So if we put the 4 of those together, personal branding, direct marketing, media buzz building and PR, media creation, we can position you as one of the top entertainment lawyers in the country. So I bit. So we did it. Within a year of me practicing law full time, I was billing at over $1,000 an hour. And I'm in Orlando. Not that place matters that much, but most of those deals go down to LA or New York. So I don't tell you that to brag. I tell you that to tell you that it worked. So I did what any 20-something-year-old kid who's billing at $1,000 an hour would do. I went to Jack and said, this is awesome, but I don't want to do it anymore. He said, great, what do you want to do? So I want to travel the world and teach people how to do what we did because we just created a freedom formula. Now, if anyone follows our formula, they can work less, make more, they can work more, make more, they can have more of an impact. That's what they can do. So he said, that's a great idea, Nick, but you have one big problem. So what's that? He said, you're your only testimonial. Duly noted. So he said, you should write a book. So I said, like an ebook? And he's like, well, everyone's doing ebooks, but no, you'll never get the same type of credibility you'll get from an actual physical hard copy book. So I bit again. We wrote a book called Celebrity Branding You. It took about 6 months to write it. I did what I call drive-by writing. It's like the computer's open, and I kind of walk by and do a little bit of that because I don't sit down for very long, if you haven't noticed. So we wrote the book Celebrity Branding You, and we took the book, and we were getting ready to launch the book. And I did what I thought he had done on his last book because he had a 3-book deal with McGraw-Hill. Him, the publicist, everyone brought in this guy. His only job was to make the book a bestseller. So I tried to study what he was doing. He wouldn't tell me anything, and I tried to replicate it for our book. I also emailed everyone I'd ever met and said practically, I will fly to your house and wash your dog if you will buy my book. So we launched the book. My son, it was Halloween Day 2008. My son was in a pirate costume, jokes later, and I filmed the video, and it said, our mateys buy my daddy's book. Shameless, I know, but it worked. The day the book came out, we had 7 bestseller lists, and my life's never been the same since. I travel around the country and now the world. I gave away 1,000 books. That's how I made my first 7 figures. I gave away 1,000 books. That's how I made my first 7 figures. So you don't make money by selling a book, you make money by having a book. Big, important point. So now I do that for over 2,200 clients all around the world. And the thing that I want to break down for you today is that's my story. Why I told you my story is because of one thing. Branding is simply storytelling. Most people will try to confuse you about what it is. It's simply storytelling. Tell your story, and that's building your brand. And ultimately, you want other people telling your story for you. So you have to figure out how to tell that story in a way that's effective, that they will want to pass it along to. So we'll do a little exercise here. Try to fill in the blank for me. Tastes great, less. Melts in your mouth, not in your. Got not milk, but, or got, I messed that one up. Got not beer, but milk. Yeah, right. That's it. All right. So how do you know all these things? Repetition, right? So the reason why you know all these things is because brands have spent billions and billions and billions of dollars just cramming this stuff in your head. I also know you now watch entirely too much television. But brands spend billions of dollars putting this in your head. So how many of you here have about $1 billion to spend on your branding? Well, damn it, I usually get at least one. But here's what you got to do. So the only way to combat that, truly, is personal branding. Because it's the one thing that you have that no one else has and will never have. So you can either spend money trying to put trying to create associations with nameless, faceless objects and words, or you can make people connect with you personally. And so that's what we specialize in. That's what we teach people how to do. So what you have to do, you have to tell your story so that people understand who you are and where you came from. You kind of have this life, and you've got where you start and where you end, and we have this whole journey in between, and things happen to us, good things, bad things, and most of us tend to want to close the door on the bad things, right, and just forget about them. Well, all those things make you uniquely positioned to be the only person in the world to help your prospect the way you can because of what you've been through. So don't forget those things. That's part of telling your story. Okay, now storytelling is really interesting. There's the left brain and the right brain, right? So the left brain is the analytical side. The right brain is known as the creative side. If I asked you which side of the brain do you think stories appeal to, which one would you say? The right side, the creative side. It's actually wrong, that's why I ask. So the left side of the brain is actually what stories appeal to because it helps you make sense of things you otherwise wouldn't understand. So it takes a bunch of facts and puts them together into something that you want to believe in, and it makes sense out of it in the analytical side of your brain. So think about, would you rather watch Braveheart or read a book on the history of Scotland? Braveheart, right? Want to watch Mel Gibson kick some ass. So that will give you, that's how that works. Now, every time you tell a story that people connect with, there's a chemical in your brain called oxytocin that's released. That is not what Rush Limbaugh got in trouble for. That's OxyContin. This is oxytocin. This is a chemical you have in your brain. People, when you give someone a hug, when you have sex, this is released. You can actually get the same effect from telling a story. Also, when this chemical is released, it builds trust. So if you tell a great story, you build trust. Now, let's talk about how to really use this to your advantage. Now, all these things I'm telling you can be used for good or for evil. I ask that you only use them for good. So, anyone know what Dunbar's rule is? I learned it from reading Peter D. Mandis' book, Abundance. Basically, you can have 100 relationships you can only ever have really 100 relationships at one time. Been researched. I didn't do the research, but they tell me it's true. So, think about it. If someone watches Oprah every day, Oprah takes over one of those 100 spots. So if you watch Oprah every day, you take over one of those 100 spots. I think your brain can definitely distinguish between your mother and Oprah being at 1 and 100 or whatever, but the whole point is you create relationships, and Oprah is creating a relationship through media. So let's talk about the effect of media on storytelling and your brand. So you can create many media formats that are one-to-many but feel like one-to-one. Well-written newsletters, CDs, DVDs, internet videos, emails to your list. Those feel like one-to-one communications, but they're one-to-many. If you show up in your client's mailbox or inbox regularly, you will get Dunbar's rule effect, media effect on your clients and prospects. You will actually become their friend in the business. And if you have a friend in the business, how many people do you call to get a quote? One. You call your friend in the business. So it makes price irrelevant, it makes competition irrelevant, all based on building your personal brand, but you cannot do that unless you tell your story. So in closing, what I want you to understand is that building your brand is nothing more than telling your story effectively. Tell your story effectively through media. Media is simply a medium for telling your story. And when you do it effectively and you connect with people on a one-to-one level using one-to-many media formats, you can connect with lots of people, you can create relationships, the trust factor will go up, they'll get oxytocin in their brains, they will actually feel like they are a part of your story if you let them in on it. And so if they will ultimately feel like if they went to your competitors, they would be tearing down what they've helped to build. So go out and tell your story. That's how you build your brand. Thank you.
Why should someone have a personal brand site? Why does it even matter?
Right. So firstly, there's different classes of people for who it matters. And there are some people, especially right now, like the coaching, consulting, expert industry is huge, and there's a lot of people stepping into building careers around what they're selling is their personal skill sets more than a specific product or service, or that service is attached to their personal skill set. So for those people, obviously it matters because theirname.com is like the center of your online universe, right? If somebody, even if somebody sees a Facebook post or they see an ad, or they just hear about somebody from speaking on stage, they're Googling oftentimes that person, and the first thing that comes up is, for most people, usually quite embarrassing. And even and that even goes for major influencers, whether somebody's like a coach, consultant, doing something with their personal brand starting out, or they're major influencers, like a lot of the people you listed, and you, and like many others who we've worked with. When we first look at the site, it's not representing who you are in person, and it's not doing what it needs to for your business. So for a lot of people, you have your whole team has @JoePolish email addresses.
Right.
When somebody Googles Genius Network, your personal site comes up. And it's the same for most people, whether they're independent, right? Coaches, consultants, authors, speakers, or if you have a business that isn't directly sourced from or connected to your personal brand, but it's its own brand, very oftentimes it's still connected to a personal brand or personal reputation.
Yeah.
And just like personal reputation damage will harm the brand itself, like for example, I'm looking at your bookshelf. There's Branson books.
Yeah.
And if
I don't know why there's Branson books on there. No.
so if Branson started doing things that were really damaging to his personal brand, it would affect people doing business with Virgin companies. And it's
I'm surprised at all things he's done that has not happened too much. I mean,
well,
certainly.
he's polarizing. He's authentic. So people that want to do business with Virgin are people that like how Virgin and how he shows up in the marketplace. There's certain people who are just, because it's polarizing, they're like, hell no, that I don't support that. And he doesn't want those people, which I think is also really important in a personal brand, is to determine it's authentic. It's what you stand for and who you are. For you, you'll talk about addiction quite a bit in Genius Network.
Yes.
And for people that are turned off by that, or just like, listen, I want nothing to do with that conversation, it's like, cool, you don't have to be a part of this. But for most people, they're like, cool, either they'll, maybe some people tolerate it, but I think most people actually love that as part of the conversation, love that it's open and authentic. So we're getting more into like the tips here, but I think it's important to be authentically expressed in a personal brand and not really fear that, oh, this is going to hurt my business, because then you're going to have a neuroses no matter what. If like this is who I am versus this is who my business is, and you have to hide. Ideally, this is something that gets you more congruent with your business message and your personal message. So I think it's whether somebody has a business around their personal name, or if somebody has a business that has nothing to do with who they are at that time, but there's a brand that they have out in the marketplace, who they are personally as a CEO and founder will still impact either positively or negatively, and you get to choose that, the success of the business and the reputation of the business.
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple things based on what you said that are important. If you try to portray yourself as someone that you're not, and it's easily found out that you're not that way, don't sit and try to build a whole business about pontificating positive messages if you're really an asshole behind the scenes. I mean, if you, like an example, Larry Winget, who's a buddy of mine, he's very polarizing.
Yep.
And he watched, there's a comedian, some people that are younger may not know the comedian, but Dennis Miller, who he was watching on TV years ago, and he was Larry Winget was this professional speaker wearing the suits, doing the whole thing, and he heard Dennis Miller say, I'm not very endearing. And for some reason that just hit him that, I'm not very endearing either. I'm not an endearing person. And so he created, he's like, I'm just going to be me. He started wearing these crazy clothes, shaved his head, earrings, big bracelets, all this, crazy boots. I mean, if you've never seen Larry Winget, he's a character. You can watch one of my interviews with him on video. I do a whole tour through his boot closet, which is funny. But he's just really hardcore, and it's very congruent with who he is. But a lot of people I've even heard people say this, this is what I want to portray. This is who I am, on stage in my brand, but that's not who I am as a person. I'm like, well, why the hell would you even do that? That just seems like a pain in the ass.
Yeah, the incongruency becomes painful.
Yeah, it's like trying to remember lies, it's like trying to pretend to be someone that you're not. And so, if you want to create characters and all that, or, some people are like, well, what if my real me is like a shy, introverted, scared person, but I want to, well, first off, there's ways to build your persona around that can become, very, very approachable by very many people. I think the reason a lot of people resonate with me in the field of addiction and recovery is I'm so open about talking about all of my struggles, talking about all the shit that, has happened in my life, and a lot of people, I think, find it, find me real. And I really hope that I come across that way.
Yeah.
And there is a time and a place for it. Most people, not all, but most people have drank beer. Most people at some point in their life have gone to church, but most people don't drink beer in church. So there's a time and place on how you portray yourself. But at the end of the day, whatever you build your business and your brand around, I really should be around you, who you really are. David Ogilvy, who's one of the greatest advertising minds in history,
he wrote a book, years ago called Ogilvy on Advertising, and what he said is that brand is the personality of your product or service. And I've always liked that sort of definition, because there's a lot of people that talk about brand, and I always say, you can't deposit name recognition in the bank. A small service business is an example, or a small company that doesn't have the ad budget of an Apple Computers or a Coca-Cola or a McDonald's. They're not going to build a global brand just by having logos.
That's why it's so vital. It's to firstly fuse it with the direct response elements and to do what works, and then also for brand to be not just something that you invent and create. It's not just a blank canvas project. It's more of a, what's the essence of your brand, or if you're a personal brand, what's the essence of your personality? Like, who are you, and what are the most important parts of those of that essence to display and express out to the world that will actually resonate with people that want to do business with you.
Yeah, gotcha. Good. That's great. So, all right, let me go through some questions here. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs who have built great brands, products, services, companies, and so on, but who don't put intention into building their personal brands?
Yeah. So this has been such a interesting conversation lately with some really successful entrepreneurs who've built these really big brands, and they're like, wow, what's next for me? Because eventually they exit or they sell, and as entrepreneurs, there's still something next that they want to do. And in many ways, their personal brand is that thing that they build.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
That's what they're known for, but there's an evolved expression to that.
Yeah, I got so let me. You said something real important. Sorry to interrupt. Although that's part of my brand, I just interrupt people, and I think even the website you're building for me, which is we interrupt like as people scroll through. Kidding, that doesn't happen. Although I'm thinking that could be a strategy here. You said, if they're entrepreneurs, if they sell, they usually want to do something else. Well, here's a real easy way to find out if you're not an entrepreneur. If you ever sell your company or you have this idea of retiring, you're just not an entrepreneur. None of them want. No true achievement-minded entrepreneur ever wants to stop. And people think it's about the money. Money, of course, is important because that's how you actually, create a team, and that's how you change the world, and that's how you do what you need to do. It's the fuel that drives the engine. But at the same time, the entrepreneur is always going. So what's that have to do with building a brand? Well, you're always growing. So anyway,
right. So I believe entrepreneurs at heart most of the time are artists, or they're creators in some way, and their external their businesses are expressions of whatever it is that they're creating, and usually within a few years, oftentimes. Whatever they created, they'll want to move on to the next thing. You talk about all the time being inspired by new projects. What allows somebody in the marketplace to start new projects faster is if you have a really great personal reputation, personal list outside of what is built just for that specific company, because if that company sells, the list, the brand, the audience, all of that goes, and now you're an entrepreneur who's you've got that exit under your belt, but you're kind of starting from scratch as far as your public reputation goes. Now there's people who know you for what you've done, but now you've got to build that from scratch. So perfect example, somebody who we're supporting with his journey right now. So Michael Perella with I Love Kickboxing and his other fitness businesses, huge success in that industry. And that's been a chapter, and he'll continue to serve that industry. And there's the question for him of, okay, like what is next? How do I serve in a bigger way? As whether it's this chapter comes to a close, or whether it's like I'm taking all my skills from this and want to go into the next thing. And for him, as it is for many other entrepreneurs, it's not like, hey, I want to build another brand or another company. It's I want to use my personal skills, wisdom, all the stuff that I've gathered and garnered from all of these experiences to impact other companies or impact the world, write a book. With Tucker Max with Book in a Box, so many of his clients are people who've built successful companies and now are saying, hey, I want to take all my experiences and publish a book around it. So what I've seen, many entrepreneurs, Cameron Herold is a really great example of this as well. He walked a particular career path so he could build a few companies, playing an executive role to 9 figures, so that he could coach entrepreneurs afterwards. That was actually his dream. He just wanted to build the experience and the reputation publicly. So he was really smart at doing this because he built his personal brand the whole way. Many entrepreneurs, Michael included, and many others. There's another Mike that I talked to recently who has a company called CEO Warrior, right? Also, sold and exited from a business, and now is like, hey, how do I position my personal brand alongside this other training company that I'm doing? So the advice is start doing this sooner rather than later, because at some point you're going to want to do it. For you, it was Piranha Marketing, all the different expressions of that. And then Genius Network and other brands and projects and all these things you've been involved with. At the center of that is Joe Polish. And if all of those brands went away, you'd be like, well, I'm still Joe Polish, and I've still got my personal reputation with the world, and the emails that go out from me, and everybody knows who Joe Polish is. And if every one of your brands and companies all of a sudden just got destroyed for whatever reason, and you had to start fresh, you still have your personal brand, reputation, list, audience. So I think it's whether you're focused on building a business that's right now in a consultative or kind of like a speaker, author, whatever fashion around your personal brand, or not, or you're just building a separate company, start that process sooner than later, even if it's baby steps. And then the additional benefit of that too is you end up, if you have a great personal brand presence, you end up getting speaking engagements, more media and PR, because most media and people who run podcasts and all of these people, they want to talk to the person, right? They want to interview the person. They want to write the story about the person and their entrepreneurial story more than they want to write about a company or a brand. So it opens you up for even greater media exposure for whatever external brands you're building, if you're building a really solid personal brand and sharing your story with the world.
Right. Yeah, and the interesting thing too, it's because you take Genius Network, which is one of my main things, and so much of my life goes through Genius Network, the organization, but also the activity of Genius Networking and being a Genius Networker and all the different ways that I talk about it. And I've never wanted Genius Network to be known for Joe Polish. I wanted it to be known for the people that are in Genius Network. And I think it has that reputation, although, currently I'm the one that, runs it.
You're a catalyst for it.
Correct.
You're not Genius Network, and Genius Network isn't you, but you're a catalyst for growing Genius Network. And then Genius Network then supports your personal reputation and connections as well.
Yeah, exactly. So no, it's a good point. So what are some key questions people should be asking when creating their personal brand sites? Meaning how should they, because I'm sitting here again going back to if someone never has an opportunity beyond hearing us right now to think about this, how would they feel equipped to know what to do?
Right. So I think there's three lenses that we look through, and I have a cat on my shirt here that helps.
Yes, you do.
Remind of this.
That is a cat.
So the three lenses are purpose, perception, and personality. So purpose, perception, personality.
What sort of drugs were you on when you first came up with that sort of analogy?
I love cats. I give this presentation. When I give a presentation like this on stage, I tell people that three things about me. One of them is I like cats and poetry. Okay. And I end up doing spoken word performance at the end of it, but I use all these cat puns throughout because it's fun. It helps people remember, and for me, it's part of my little personal essence. That people who know me well know that I like cats. So purpose, perception, personality. Right? There's other ways to say that, but this is easy to remember.
That's great.
So the purpose piece of that is just asking what and asking this for the site as a whole, and asking for each section and each page of the site. What is the primary purpose of this site and the secondary purpose of this site? Like, what do I want somebody to do? Oftentimes people start design without ever answering that question for themselves, and then people waste tens of thousands of dollars trying to create a website that doesn't achieve a particular purpose. So, asking that first, and usually for most people it's, I want to build my list, and whether it's I want to drive people into a particular program and drive applications, or it's I want more speaking gigs, right? I want more media exposure, but asking those questions and then building your entire site around that as a purpose, because it'll tell you where to put what buttons, what navigation you should have, how the home page scrolls, a lot of the copy that you should have. If you just ask the purpose, and part of that purpose question is like for who, right? Who's going on the site, and what do I want them to do is what is the purpose of the site. Yeah, so 2 is perception. And perception is, this is the fun balance of, what do you want people to experience you as? And it's not being inauthentic, because the 3rd is actually personality, which is being authentically yourself. But it is that how you're perceived matters, and you get to intentionally control that perception in a way that's authentic to you. But Neil Patel has this really great article. It's like how spending $162,000 on clothes made me $692,000 or something like that. And he did nothing else different. He started going to his sales meetings, his high-level B2B sales meetings, did nothing else different but started wearing super high-end clothes. And his conversions increased, and his overall just top-line sales increased. And just same presentation, same personality, same everything.
Interesting.
So the difference was, how are people experiencing and perceiving him? And it wasn't like those clothes were any more or less authentic to him than the clothes that he was wearing before, but people were experiencing him differently. So it's the same online. I look at your website is a representation. In many ways, it should be an expression of who you are in person.
Well, and, this is very interesting what you said too, because there's ways that how people try to portray, be it class or wealth or peacocking or there's a million different ways that you can categorize this. But we have a Genius Network member who's been in the group for a few years, named Devang, and he is an Indian guy. And he's a financial advisor. He's a wealth advisor, and he owns a bunch of franchises for different investments that he has. And I think he has a Ferrari, a Bentley, and I think a Rolls Royce. And he buys these cars, parks them to where his office is, where he has all these other advisors. And once he started doing that, all of these other people started doing business with him and working with him that did not. And he's actually explained to me how by buying these cars, it just has made him more money than what it even cost him to buy these cars, in the way he's positioning it. Now, what I get afraid of when I say stuff like that is people are under the belief that, if they go and buy something expensive, especially if they're not in a position to do that somehow is going to translate to money, which in many cases it doesn't at all, unless you actually are strategic about how you do it.
Right, it should be intentional, it should be congruent to where you're actually at. But I think the reason I share this so often is most of the time people's sites are incongruent to where they're at in just an underselling and negative way. Like for most people, again, including a lot of the influencers we mentioned, we know who they are. And if you go to their sites, you're like, this is a joke. Some 7th grader threw up a WordPress template with some broken links, and this is this person's website who's supposedly this major influencer, and it does damage first-time experiences and first-time perceptions. And if that's the case, imagine for somebody who's not a best-selling author, but who is selling, maybe it's $20,000 consulting packages, or who is saying, hey, I'm a really great speaker and I want to speak in front of your corporate audience, and they're selling $10,000 speeches, which there's many great speakers out there who are really wonderful speakers who, if you go to their website, it does not remotely represent the level of professionalism or brand and all of that they are. So that's where perception comes in, right? It's if I'm booking speakers and I'm going on there and the person has a total joke of a website, I don't even know where to click to book the person, right? And I can't see testimonials of their speaking, and I can't download their media kit, and all these things aren't there, and they're presenting themselves as a speaker, I will make the assumption that they're probably not a professional.
Right.
And if I go on the site and I see, a beautiful speaking reel, and I see some great photos of them speaking, and I see their bio that I would put on my event site, and I see some testimonials of similar companies like mine who have hired that person to speak, and then I see an application that says, some details about my event, to get in touch with the speaker's assistant. Now I'm like, it could be the same exact quality of speaker, but that perception, that site is now creating a perception of professionalism and something high end that I'd want to pay money for.
Right. Yeah. Love it. Okay. And so next is
personality, right? So personality, just really being authentic. You know, we talked about this quite a bit. It's in our portfolio specifically, I like playing around with this. You know, if you look at like joepolish.com, frankkern.com, yannicksilver.com, they all follow virtually the same formula. And we can go into that formula a bit so that people could kind of like, as they're building their own sites, copy that formula for themselves. But it's important if you copy a formula, which is just the structure of what goes where, when, which is guided by purpose, but also guided by just the structure, that usually just works for most sites, that somebody isn't copying that formula while also trying to copy the design elements. Because Yannick's site is, you know, a bunch of colorful doodles, and literally the blog is like a journal, and is very Yannick.
Right.
Frank's site, you know, looks like a direct response ad. And it's black and white with a little bit of like red and gold throughout. It's very Frank, and it's very much like, it's more of like Ogilvy style, which is representative of who he is, but follows the same formula.
Yeah, totally.
And then if we look at your site, it's more like walking around like the Genius Network office, where it has an air of professionalism, but also like fun and artsy, and has some of the gaping void style imagery on there, and uses a lot of like great photography of both like you and the events. So each of them follows the same structure, but each of them expresses the personality really differently. So for somebody building their own site, or let's say, you know, you're working with an agency or a freelancer, giving more of, hey, this is my essence, this is the stuff that's really fun for me, this is the stuff that's important to me, in addition to these are the goals that I want to achieve with my site, will allow that site to be a much more authentic expression of who they are. And the impact on the audience is that people will be more likely to experience them through that site, and therefore more likely to buy or subscribe, because it's not generic, it's not a copycat, it's that person and their expression online.
Gotcha. No, so that's good. So perception, purpose, perception, personality.
Yes.
Let's talk about advertising and marketing and brand building. And since you work with a lot of big brands, and I am pretty much a hardcore direct response guy, I want to talk to you about that subject because you're an expert in it. And I'd like to first start with asking you to define what is a brand?
What is a brand is an interesting question, because I agree with you, most people don't know what it is and they mistake it for something else. Brands started, literally it comes from the word grandeur, which was a term for burning an insignia to show ownership on cattle and other livestock. And that's literally where modern brands, the brand came from. So 400 years ago, brands were about livestock, and then they were set out by certain guilds to protect the purity of the product that that guild was trying to sell, like silver, like gold, and so on. Brands as a phenomenon in business, it's really been in the last probably 15 or 20 years that that's become a topic of conversation, and it's really heated up in the last 10 or so. And there are iconic brands that we look to, like Disney. What a brand is, and I'll go back to Disney and Apple, which are both interesting examples. A brand is a story well told. That's what a brand is. And that story has to be about what the core value and core product is that you're trying to sell. Where the mistake is made a lot is in not drawing a distinction between a brand and branding. Branding is how you get the message out there, through advertising, through marketing, through public relations. That's branding. But you have to start with a core message about the values of that company that resonate with their consumer base. And of course, you have to have the product behind it to deliver on that promise, because a brand is a promise. So, for example, Disney, the brand is family entertainment.
Right.
They deliver on that promise through their amusement parks and through their movies and that kind of thing. It's family entertainment. And they've delivered on that promise very well. they're held up as one of the prime American brands. But when Disney was building the company, he didn't think about it as branding.
Right.
He just wanted control over his business and over the image of his business. And there's an interesting footnote there in terms of what Walt would do when evaluating the various opportunities that came his way, or when he was thinking about initiating new ideas. What he would say is, what would Mickey do? Mickey was Mickey Mouse, but he used Mickey Mouse as his barometer for what he would do or not do. Would Mickey do this? I don't think so. It's not a good idea. And so those things that Mickey would do became brand extensions. Those things that Mickey wouldn't do. And it was literally like that. That was literally the question posed in the meetings. Would Mickey do this? Jump ahead to Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren, his brand is associated with status and good taste. That's what his brand is about.
Can we refer to him as Ralph Lauren? Because I would prefer that.
Considering he hires me, I'll pronounce it correctly.
Okay.
You don't have to worry about it. But, you know, Ralph Lauren's brand proposition is status and good taste.
Yeah.
Instead of the mouse ears, he's got the polo pony. But he's got his iconic brand symbol. And the most valuable thing that any business has, this was true of Disney, this was true of Ralph Lauren, it's true of Apple, it's true of all the major brands, is their brand equity. And that means what their brand means to a consumer public. So when Ralph was experiencing very difficult business times in the 90s, before he went public, it wasn't the factories full of his clothes or the stores full of the finished fashion or the bolts of fabric. That's not what made his company have such a high valuation. It was the brand equity he had built on a global scale that made that valuable and made that important. And creating that brand is a process that takes consistency in terms of establishing your brand signature. Like family entertainment, that means if you're Disney, you don't do an X-rated movie.
Right.
You know, if you're Ralph Lauren, you don't do something that's cheap or not well done, because that doesn't fall under the umbrella of status and good taste. And you take a brand to its pinnacle. For instance, if I go like that, what brand is that?
Nike.
I mean, now think how amazing that is. That I can go like that, and you, and my students at Parsons and so on, immediately know that that's Nike. Do you know how many hundreds of millions of dollars they spent on advertising and marketing, everything, to embed that in our minds? The brand equity of Nike is astounding, what they've done. Similarly with Apple. You know, Apple stands for hip innovation. You know, and they do that through their design, through the incredibly effective marketing they do, so that they announce things and people are anticipating the next tablet, the next iPhone, the next whatever. Whether they even need it, which most people don't, they want it.
Right.
Because of how effectively they have built their brand equity.
Okay, well let's take the Nike example, because they're, you know, if someone wants to just go out there and create a swoosh, that in and of itself will never make a company,
Right.
you know, grow. I mean, and you take a company like Harley Davidson, where, you know, I think has some pretty serious brand loyalty when you have your own clientele tattooing your logo and your name on their bodies physically. I mean, that's taken it to a whole nother level. And, you know, in order to get to something like that, there's all of this stuff that needs to occur. And so I think when people try to model all of these companies that you know, talked about, that are small business owners, they're going to have a pretty rude awakening if they don't have some pretty effective, you know, what's in it for me sort of messaging for people to first start buying, using, consuming, wearing, whatever. Before consumption starts, brand in and of itself does not create sales. It may be one piece of it, but there's a whole infrastructure that goes along with it, a whole strategy, and that's what I'd like to kind of get some of your thoughts on.
Well, Nike, for instance, started as, a unique athletic shoe. That they first made the soles of the shoes on a waffle iron.
Right.
Yep. So they had a unique product that was used by the Oregon track team, and it had a authenticity to its origin. So that swoosh stands for aspirational athletic achievement. That, their phrase, which was brilliant and simple, just do it, became part of the vernacular. But all of the underpinning of that was an authentic product that delivered on the promise. Same with Disney, same with Apple, same with Ralph Lauren. So if you think that you can throw all the money in the world at an ad campaign, you can maybe fool people once, but you can't build a brand, because a brand requires repeat business and adding other members to the tribe, so to speak. But all of that is built on the foundation of an actual product that has to, in some way, enhance the value of the lives of people that buy it. Whether it makes them just feel better, or they feel they can run better, or they can enjoy their families at a vacation spot better, whatever it is. But you're right, there has to be that authenticity. And a lot of people just think if they promote the hell out of something, they can sell it. And they think that doing that makes them a brand, which it doesn't.
My favorite definition of branding came from David Ogilvy, or brand, where he said, a brand is the personality of your product or service. And I think that's just a great definition. And so I'd like to talk about, obviously, a company that you've spent a lot of time with, Victoria's Secret, and what is their strategy? How does it all work? Is it the attractive models? What is it? What does their brand represent? What are they communicating? And when you put together a commercial for them, what are you wanting to convey?
Well, let me ask you, I'll flip it a bit. What does Victoria's Secret represent to you?
Seriously, what does it represent? Probably the best underwear, panties, undergarments, bras, etc. that a woman could buy that is sexy, that is hot, that allows any woman to have the association with beauty and sexiness and that sort of stuff.
And you're right. Just like Nike is about the aspiration of athletic achievement, Victoria's Secret is about the aspiration of being sexy and beautiful.
That's it. It's aspirational wear.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what they have done as a company, and what is the brilliant strategy that they've employed, is that they have worked with developing the idea of Victoria's Secret as that sexy aspirational brand, yet tasteful, but also that they have created the personality of their brand through the models they've used over the years.
Yeah.
So they've got...
Which is obviously a smart strategy.
Part of what I've done with them in the video content that I create for them online is also allowing the personalities of the models to come through. So they aren't just beautiful women that are somehow objectified. When you see Adriana Lima, you see somebody who's very funny and has just a great personality, and she's a lot of fun. You see Doutzen, who has another kind of a personality. She was authentically an athlete, and she's now one of the faces of the VSX, which is their sport apparel. She was a competitive speed skater before she was ever a model.
Right.
So she's like authentic. When you see the workout tapes we've done with her, she does that stuff. It's pretty impressive. On a certain level, they've become, if you will, accessible movie stars.
Right.
People see them in the catalogs, they see them in the commercials, they see them online in the videos, then they can go to the store and get a signed picture or even have their picture taken with them. So they have created an aspirational brand through employing very selective choices of these, what they call supermodels, that represent the brand. That's an ever-changing stable.
What is really being accomplished then when you put together, how do you know when it's working? How do you know when it's not?
Well, That's, the multi-million-dollar question, depending on how large your brand is.
Well, yeah, because I guess a brand could, like, a direct response guy would say, have a call to action, drive them to a website, have a trackable mechanism, make a specific offer. When you're doing that without all of that, how do you structure success?
Well, I think your question is, how do you measure success?
Yeah.
Right? And so...
And and when I say structure, how do you create it so that, it is successful? That's what I meant by structure success. How do you measure it?
There is a strategy to getting the name out there. However, there's no one strategy. And as the marketplace, the way to reach consumers has gotten more and more splintered. You have to do more innovative things to get in front of the consumers. I believe the most precious commodity out there now is people's attention. And to get their attention, to hold their attention, and hopefully to be able to sustain it over time, which is what it takes to build a brand, is a tough go. Because oftentimes results are not immediate.
Right.
And to sort of plant your flag in a particular marketplace, nobody can think of women's lingerie without first thinking of Victoria's Secret. One of the reasons is they outspend everybody. But in their outspending everybody to capture that attention, they also make more money than any other lingerie company. Ralph Lauren spends probably more than any apparel company, yet they make more money on a global scale than any apparel company. The strategies are, again, as you said, and it can't be repeated enough, first of all, having the product that is going to be attractive to a consumer, having an authentic base from which to build your brand is critical. But even the smallest company, the smallest startup, has got to start asking itself, what are the brand values that we're trying to imbue? What are the core values of our product? What is it we can say about our product? What does it do? Why does it make your life better? Why should anybody want it? And that's key before you worry about how you get the message out there. First of all, you got to have a message to convey, and a message that people don't hear and think, well, that's bullshit. I've seen it. It's crap.
Right.
So it's got to be the first question you ask when you start a business is anybody going to start a market for this? Whatever it is, whether it's a service, or whether it's a product, is there a market for it? Why is there a market for it? Who's my market? How do I reach that market? What websites do they go to, or what TV shows do they watch? Or, how do I capture their attention? And then after that, how do I build on the attention I've gotten? So that not only will they come back in the ideal sense, and this happens very much with Apple, is that your consumers become evangelists for your brand.
Yeah, which I think says everything about the substance of what you're selling, because I don't know of many long-sustaining brands that were just pure crap that had any real competition come along. There's certainly brands that are cheap, and there's certainly things like that, but they still, in their own worlds, if there's going to be long, we're talking decades of sustainability, there has to be substance. And I think all of those things you discussed that are needed with a brand strategy, what's your purpose, all of that requires sophistication. It requires execution. And so when someone just looks at a brand and says, oh, I've got this really cool web application, I'm going to be the next Facebook, it's like, well, there's a little more to it than that.
I think there's an illusion out there that it's easy to win the lottery.
Yeah.
So you see, whether it's Facebook, which, interestingly, since it's gone public, has performed horribly.
Right.
And there's Google, and there's those companies that are, in the span of the business timeline, quite new.
Yeah, very new. They're in infancy stage at the time we're recording this.
Right, who have, though built a perceived equity that's very great. And one of the things that's changed from when I was in my 20s is that as opposed to embarking on a career or something, I know so many people, because I'm in contact with them every day, as you are, who devote their time and energy to starting a business. And if it doesn't go public or pop big, they're on to something else.
Right.
Everybody's looking to grab that golden ring, but most of them just end up going in circles.
Yeah.
Because the number of companies that turn into Facebook, that turn into those companies that blossom into huge businesses like that are very small. Most startups fail, and a lot of them just incinerate money along the way.
Yes, totally.
It's really interesting because I don't think that the basic principles of business have changed. You've got to have a desirable product or service that people are willing to pay for, and they have to be willing to pay enough for it so that your business can grow.
Yeah, and you've got to be able to price accordingly, position it properly, market it effectively, or it's going to go nowhere, because there's plenty of amazing, awesome products that never see the light of day because they have the whole strategy screwed up. I'm going to make a couple other points, but I want to ask you first about story, because you are a great storyteller. Even throughout the entire time that I've known you, you've sent me books here and there about stories, telling stories, and it's critical in order to get your message out to the world. You got to tell your story. You got to tell a pretty damn incredible, better story than the next person if you want what you were talking about earlier, which is attention, because that's the economy that we live in, the attention economy.
Yeah, I think that what's really interesting is storytelling is going back to our most primitive tribal selves when we sat around the campfire and told stories. And oftentimes the shaman or medicine man was the one that told the best stories because he created the illusion or perception that he could control the rain and the thunder and the crops coming up and whatever. Storytelling goes back to probably when there was more than one person in a room. Right. And storytelling is a really nice term that relates to sales. You have to tell the story of your product, the story of your brand. Salespeople are storytellers. Everybody is, to some degree or another, a storyteller if they're talking about something and they're hoping to capture your attention and then get some result, whether it's persuasion, sales, forming some kind of alliance or whatever. It's all about the stories we tell. That's how we bond as human beings, is through our stories. All of these things, storytelling is huge. So it's huge in terms of communicating what's important or what we want people to believe is important in things. So you go back to our most primitive selves, and then you apply that idea of storytelling to the most cutting edge technology. And if you don't have storytelling as a part of that technology, then it's like a car without a spark plug. That ingredient will keep the whole mechanism from moving forward.
Okay, so how does someone tell a good story? How do you do it?
I think that, you can certainly look to Hollywood for telling good stories. Getting your attention, holding your attention. And of course the best movies are kind of timeless stories. So I think that storytelling means that in the traditional sense there's a beginning, middle, and an end. When you think of childhood stories, it's once upon a time. Right. You get something going with engaging your listener from the beginning. But you have to make them somehow feel a part of it. Either that they can benefit from that story that you're telling them, they will be entertained. Just like education, which I consider an act of seduction. In other words, my students need to want to know what I've got to say. That's also the same thing for sales. That's also the same thing for an actor on stage. It's all of those things. When I've seen you, and I hate to say it, but you're brilliant in terms of on stage, your storytelling, whether you're telling the stories about your guests that you're bringing up to speak or what people can accomplish, that's storytelling. And I think that It's storytelling, I think, is both a skill in understanding how to do it and an art form in terms of how you do it. So there's the ingredients and construct of the story, which is the skill part, and then there's the art of it, which is being able to tell a compelling story and hold people's attention.
Right.
Every time you communicate, you have an opportunity to influence people's lives for the better. But it's challenging to remember that because we have so much pressure in our day and so many projects to complete. And what happens is we get into this conveyor belt mindset. And for many of us, time as entrepreneurs can feel very tight. It can feel almost like this conveyor belt that moves along in a linear and limited fashion. And on this conveyor belt, we imagine they're empty boxes, and our job is to pack each box with as many activities as we can, just getting through the day so that at night we can lie in our bed and say, that was a good day, look at all the things I did. So a day for you on your entrepreneurial conveyor belt might look something like this. You're asleep all cozy in your bed. The alarm goes off, and we often grab our phone right away, and we're in our phone, and we're squinting into the light, checking our emails. We get undressed, we get in the shower, we get dressed, maybe we have breakfast with the kids, we send them off, we get in our car, and we drive to work, and if we're like Joe Polish, we're making video messages while we're driving. We get to work, we're on the phone, we're on our emails, we've got opt-ins and surveys, squeeze pages and funnels, we've got teleseminars and webinars, you're working on the book, you're working on the blog, you're eating lunch at your desk to make up for lost time, you have a client meeting, you have a client call, you have a meeting about a meeting. More things, you've got spreadsheets and Excels, you're working at Facebook and Twitter, and maybe you're lucky you get to the gym, you change your clothes and you're at the gym, and you're on the bicycle, you're on the treadmill, you take Pilates, yoga, breathe, bicep, biceps, tricep, ab, bicep, biceps, triceps, ab. We're in yoga, we're checking our emails in yoga. We go home, we can pick up gluten-free bagels and green juice and groceries, we put them away, 3 more things done. We have dinner with the family, we send them off to bed, we get in bed, we channel surf. We're looking at our favorite TV show, we read our book on spirituality. But then we check our email one more time and we go to sleep. And that's considered a good day. And that's just Sunday. So, if we're in this time crunch, how do we reconnect with what really matters? How do we communicate in a fast-paced world? And so, I'd like to share with you a strategy I've given my top clients, which has not only changed their perception of what they're doing in their business, but their perception of who they really are. And it's the foundation before you even plan your communications. So I'm going to ask you a question here, and I'm going to ask you to close your notebooks, your computers, put down your pens, and trust the first response that comes to you. So in other words, don't second guess your first idea. And the question is this: if you were on a desert island and you were dying, but there was a young person there with you, someone whom you cared deeply about, and you could only give that young person one piece of advice before you died about life and how to live it, what would that piece of advice be? And whatever just flew into your head is the starting of the thread of what I call your through line, the driving force behind your life. For some of you, it might be, life is a game, enjoy it. For others, it might be, follow your dreams. Some might say, don't be afraid to be yourself, or be kind. Some business-minded friends of mine have said, find someone who is the success that you want and model it. Whatever it was that you said is what you believe in the end really matters in life. And so my challenge to you is, how do you take your business and make it an expression of that through line that drives you through your life so that you're not on the conveyor belt, but you understand that all these details, these duties, these data, these deadlines add up to something, what I call your noble intent, that you're fusing that constantly. Because when we don't, our day does feel frazzled. So when you reconnect with what really matters and you start positioning and packaging and creating your communication materials to support that noble intent, it takes you from a transactional entrepreneur, not just to transformational, but to transcendent. Because your customers, your clients, your audience, whether it's 1 or 1,000 or millions, knows that you understand, in the end, a higher purpose. So then your next challenge becomes, if your customers, your clients, and your audience are on that conveyor belt, how do you take them off? Well, if the challenge is that everyone is busy, then what is the solution? I think it's to stop time. Bob Dylan said the purpose of art is to stop time. And I think that's true. Great art stops time. When you're in a movie, you're out of the conveyor belt. Time has stopped. When you see an extraordinary play or you go to a rock concert, you're not on the conveyor belt, you're transported. Or a rock concert of any kind, a symphony, a great book, a beautiful painting, an amazing meal, that is a work of art. So if art stops time, then the challenge for you becomes, how do you turn your communication, your business, your busyness into an art? How do you make every experience for those that you serve so extraordinary that it takes them out of time and off that conveyor belt? And I think when we do that, we've provided a great service and we lead them towards a noble intent, ideally theirs, what matters to them. So here's what puts people back on the conveyor belt. And I think it's the biggest mistake I've seen made, whether you're in a sales pitch or a keynote, doing your 2-minute video, your 2-day training, your 20-minute TED Talk, is that people tend to focus too much on the information they want to convey and not enough on the experience they're creating. Because if you think back to a great communication setting you were part of, what you remember is not just all the information, but how that information came to you, the experience of it. And if it's an extraordinary communication, it took you out of time. So rather than think of of giving information, think of creating an experience. A client meeting could be an experience. Your 2-day training could be an experience. Not what are we going to teach, what's all the content we're going to teach, but how are we going to do that? A conversation could be an experience. So how do you do that? How do you create that experience? Well, if you think of your through line, that question, that answer that I just gave you, for your noble intent from the desert island, if you think of that beaming through your business, your presentation, imagine that as a triangle, then what comes out the other side are all the different ways that you can express it. So I often think of it like a prism. Your through line is like the white light, it's your message. And then all the different ways you can express that. And the extraordinary part of a prism that we take for granted, oh yeah, I know optics, Newton, prisms, but think about it. What makes that light so bright is the combination of colors. When you start restricting yourself and pulling colors out, you dim your light. And what does this mean for you as an entrepreneur, as a person? Well, so often we get in our industry and say, well, I'm in insurance, I'll do it like everyone else. Well, I'm an internet marketer, I'll do it like everyone else. Well, I'm in healthcare, I'll have to dress and act and sound like everyone else. And we start to shave off parts of who we really are. And we cut ourselves off and we put ourselves into a mold and we lose our light. As well, your audience, we all know this, adult learning, they need different modalities to absorb your information. So if you're always expressing it in one color and not the full spectrum, they may not receive it the way you want. So you think, here's my through line, here's my message. What are all the different ways that I can express that so that they receive what it is I'd like to share? And as you begin to do this, you create this mesmerizing experience for your audience. So there are 3 parts you want to consider in any presentation. And if you're missing any one of these, you'll falter. You have to have extraordinary content. You have to have great material. But then you need to structure it properly. And you need to deliver it with excellence. If you have great delivery skills and charisma, but no content, it's a problem. If you've got content, but it's not well structured, it's a problem. So you need all these three things, not unlike a three-legged stool, for it to be cohesive, to connect, and to land. Some people speak in all one color. Courage, action, determination, ladies and gentlemen, this is the triad of success, and I am here. And that is exhausting. And then you see people who feel they have to be all pastel. Hello, everyone. My name is Maya Diora. Let's talk about meditation and mindfulness. Did anyone see The Matrix? And they're not, and you sense somewhere they're not who they really are. There's some phoniness. There's sort of a false persona because they're afraid to show who they really are. And then you see presenters who are overcoached. You can't tell what color they are. They've lost all their light. They're like black. They've lost all their light. And they look like this. All right, let me do my presentation for you. They come into my studio in New York City. Ready? Hello, everyone. I am so honored to... And I say to them, what you doing there? They'll say, well, I worked with this coach. They told me I had. I said, well, how does that feel? And they go, well, it feels a little weird. And I say, it looks a little weird. You know, because they've lost who they really are. So what you're looking for is that full expression of your personality, your creativity, your unique approach. So what you want to do next is take the audience on a journey. Take them out of time like a film director takes them out of time. And the way I have my clients do this is the #1 time-saving technique. Joe's using it, JJ, Kellyanne, Lisa Sasevich, the people I've coached. If you look at it like this, you're taking the audience on a journey, whether you're planning a keynote. I've done it for my large-scale keynote events. And here's Joe texting me with Dean Jackson. They were putting together a project. Here's JJ putting together her PBS special. We're in her hotel room planning it. Here's the head of JC Deco. They do all the advertising at airports, the concessions. So we put together a $400 million pitch. We won it using this system. And Microsoft, think about it, Microsoft invented PowerPoint. So at first they were very resistant to working on index cards. They're like, no, we'll do it on our PowerPoint. But this is Takeshi Nomoto, who runs Windows 365. We put his presentation together and rocked it. And here is my client, John Roskell, 17,000 in the audience. All of this created with index cards and taking the audience on a journey to take them out of time and stop time. So here are some of the elements you can consider. It's a busy slide. You can take a photo. All of these create different experiences for your audience. Maybe you have a challenging question. You have a key point. Then you have them doing an interactive exercise. You're doing a little video. And throughout, you're taking them on this unexpected journey so they never see what's coming next. What makes it boring and long is when it's one color. You want variety. The audience craves variety. And so the last element I want to share with you is this. To craft your first and your final moment. There is no work of art in the performing arts that begins and ends randomly. And yet most presentations kind of do. Most meetings kind of do. Most meetings actually end with a final moment that is a Q&A. And you never want to end on a Q&A because you're giving your final moment to chance. Instead, you want to close with something that you know you can control. Your video, your story, your bit, your quote. And so my final moment for you is to share with you something I learned from my great mentor, which is to take what could be a transactional element, in his case, mime, Marcel Marceau, the great French mime, and take it from transactional to transcendent. So for him, it wasn't just a bird. It wasn't just a wall or a rope. If he was the bird, it was this. And that is my hope for all of you. to stop time, take an experience, make it one that takes the audience off their conveyor belt, because that is how you rock the room.
You know how companies spend millions of dollars on advertising? And they go out there, I mean, if you just watch the Super Bowl, you'll see how much money they spend on advertising. But what I've learned is if they combine that with some public relations, they actually will get a bigger bang for their buck. And this morning we talked about marketing and how many different ways there are to market to your audience. I find there's 13 different ways. One of them is public relations and speaking. That is one tactic under marketing. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So what do I mean by a free speech? Joel always tells us to make sure we tell you exactly what we're thinking when we give you a term. And a free speech is something that you're not getting paid for and you can't make an offer from stage. So you're really just giving something to the community or connecting with someone, or in this case, being here at Genius Network, this is an opportunity for a free speech. By being a member, it's one of the benefits that we get, which all of us should be using. And I'm glad I'm using it today with you guys. Here's some ways that you can do free speeches for your audience. Of course, there's YouTube, Facebook Live, which we're doing a Facebook Live right now, webinars, social media, all of those things. And I should let you know at the end, I will give you a way to get this presentation so you don't have to take notes, you can just enjoy it. And I will also give you a couple gifts at the end as well. So I'm going to talk about Pixar, who's an iconic brand now. And happens to be, this is a view that I see on the way to my daughter's school when I drop her off in the morning. I actually go right by Pixar. And I'm inspired by the creativity that's going on inside of there. But you know, in 1986, it was just an idea. And Steve Jobs and two of his friends put this in as a side project. It wasn't even their main focus. And they went around and they gave so many free speeches. And they told so many people about what they were doing as an innovative and creative company, right? They were being mind-blowing out there, but no one knew who they were. And they spent all this time, and they even went to Disney and said, Disney, we want you to be part of this. And Disney's like, no way, don't want to have anything to do with it. We don't see this in our future. Do you know 20 years later, Disney paid over $7 billion for Pixar? But in those first years, when they were doing free speeches and they were getting out there and giving the word, other people couldn't see into the vision. But they saw their vision and they stuck with it, and that's the key. They were consistent, they kept getting the message out there, and they stuck with their vision. So me personally, I love working with global companies, companies that really want to make an impact and a positive impact around the world. I've worked with companies in finance for many, many years, in lifestyle, business, including my own company, and pets. My husband's a world-class veterinarian, and so I support him in that industry. And that industry brought me to our biggest conference just a month ago. And at that conference were 17,000 attendees. And I was invited to a free and beautiful breakfast with Jack Hanna in the penthouse. And there were about 20 of us invited, while there's 17,000 people at the conference who can't wait to meet him. Well, during that 2 or 3 hours that we spent together, a lot of people were asking him all about animals and all about the things that he did in the world around animals. And he would give a lot of canned answers and things he said a lot. Well, I had the opportunity to sit with him and his wife for a little bit, and I was asking him about his media, and he just lit up talking about it. He's like, no one ever asked me this. And so I just asked him, how did you get started? And he goes, I got started because we had an ape in captivity that was gonna have a baby, and what we wanted to do is get the word out. So he went to the local news station. Local news station put him on. Then Good Morning America saw it. They invited him on. And you know the rest after that. He spent the next years having 200 presentations on the David Letterman show. Now the thing is, in the beginning, he only got paid $0, nothing. He paid his own way, he paid his transportation, he paid his hotel room. Over time, he got a $75 stipend every time he came in. So that's pretty close to free if you're flying to New York. He said at the very end, at his 200th appearance, he started getting $125. But what happened was he built a global brand. And now, this little zookeeper who in the beginning just asked for one little story that's blossomed into another. And he said yes at every single opportunity. He's now worth over $8 million. There's very few people in veterinary medicine or in zoos that can claim that. But it was really wonderful to see how it touched his life just by saying yes. So every time you speak, you have the opportunity to create the next opportunity. I mean, that's what happens. Everyone gets up here and they talk about the last time they were here and the things that happened in between. Well, it wouldn't have happened unless they took the chance to come up here. So what you want to do in your company is create buzz around the things that you want to get out there. If you're wanting to tell the world what you do and how you do it, create a way to share that. Like we're watching Carrie who's doing it on Facebook Live. We're watching people sharing it on social media. We're watching Joe who's doing it in many different fashions. And it was really interesting because the reason I'm inspired to even share this with you today is because the last meeting I was here, Joe had mentioned he spent over $300,000, which he reminded me was $360,000, on an advertising campaign. And the advertising campaign got the name out, got his name in all these beautiful publications. But what I told him is, what if he took that $360,000, split it in half, put half into advertising and half in PR? I think I would have gotten him a bigger bang for his buck. He would have gotten so much more attention, and it would have been better attention because it would have been articles written about him, not just advertisements. So that is what sparked me to want to come to you guys today, is to start thinking when you're putting together your marketing budgets, take some time, take some energy in getting the news out to the media. The media is thirsty to tell your stories. And all it takes is one phone call and the connection and the follow through. Richard Branson is mentioned every single time in this meeting, right? I don't have to put his name up, I don't have to put anything up there. But you know, he's done many free speeches in his life too. And he's thought about many different ways to support his community and his clients. And can you believe those are his brands? Now that I have 9, I feel like I'm really behind the times, right? I'm not there. But he is managing all these because he's thinking about all the ways to connect with his ideal client. And you know, every one of those brands has a spokesperson, and every one of those brands has somebody who's putting out regular news releases and calling media and telling them what's going on. And that's why when we open USA Today or Forbes or Entrepreneur, we're constantly seeing his name out there because he's consistently getting the story out there. And it's really something that you can do as well. Right now he's worth $5.1 billion. And it all started with just little ideas, consistency, and building great teams to help him do it. So, my recommendation to all of you is to look at these companies, PR.com, PR Newswire, PR Inside, PR Web. Put a profile up there. Get things ready so that when you have news to share, which frankly should be at least once a month, if not once a week, something that's going on in your company, a new talent that you acquired, a new software that you're working with, a new collaboration, at least get the word out there so the media get used to seeing your name and who you are. And the biggest key is follow up. They won an award with Infusionsoft. It's their Elite Business of the Year for my PR marketing company, which was extraordinary. But the next day, my team went and created a news release, got it out on the wire, and then within 2 days, I had interviews with Entrepreneur Magazine, Forbes Magazine, Huffington Post. They sent me a list of all the places the news release was put, 20 pages, all around the country, all around the world, that never would have known who I was if we didn't get the word out about this. Infusionsoft is even happy because their name is being circulated with it. So not only am I happy, but the person who gave me the award is sending me a thank you note saying, wow, we love all this attention for our company. And that's how you get attention, is by creating a way for the media to talk about you, for social media to talk about you, to go viral, especially if it's a great and interesting story. Now, this is a meme that I put up in November 2015. In January 2016, all of a sudden it went viral. On a Friday, it had 1 million views. By the following Friday, it had 40 million reach. It was unbelievable how many people were looking at this meme. So I have a little thing here. 40 million reach, 328,000 shares, 2,800 comments. And it was just by sharing something that Julia Roberts, I mean, we all know she's a movie star, and she was actually sharing something that was a quote from someone else. It wasn't even her quote, but it had this huge reach. But the beauty of this is it added 25,000 names to our email list who are interested in talking about what we're interested in talking about. And it let us put them in a category where we have conversations with them based on this topic. So how would you like to add $25,000 names, actually more than $25,000, 25,000 names to your list? You can do that just as well. So paying attention to your community, planting the seeds, exactly like Joel said. These are coming up a little bit faster, but I will tell you, planting the seeds is so important, watering them, nurturing them. Looking at the ways to not only get connected, but to stay connected. Look in this room, everyone you're connected to, how do you create a way to stay connected? And then building your tribe, both online and offline, in person and online. So when you speak, you get more exposure, more opportunities, and more connections. We've established that there. And I'll tell you what, these guys are doing it, I'm doing it, and I know that you guys can do it too. And I hope that I was able to prove to you today that there is power in a free speech at the Genius Network.
Okay, I hope you found that video awesome and useful. So if you want to get a free copy of my book, I want you to click here. And if you want to watch some more videos that'll be useful and awesome, click here. Go ahead. You're over here. Do it now. Come on. Thank you. Watch them.